Torah study. So Shabbat Shalom. So have you ever had the experience of like meeting somebody and you are absolutely convinced that you've met them before or seen them before, but you can't figure out like when or where, right? I mean, who has had that experience? Okay. All right. Almost everyone. Okay. Okay. So if you are, a traditional and knowledgeable Jew, and if the other person is also Jewish, you might say, oh, I must have seen you at Mount Sinai. I'm sorry, I forgot. Okay? Now, why would you say that, right? I think we're all aware of the Midrashic claim that the souls of all Jews who would ever live stood at Mount Sinai, right? And if you are a convert, right, your soul was there too, and there's this kind of mystic belief that what happened is somehow, I don't know, there was cosmic mix-up, and your Jewish soul wound up being born into a non-Jewish body. And so you came along and you fixed that. By the way, that is not only a Jewish idea. Muslims will call somebody who was not born or did not grow up Muslim but became Muslim. They don't call them a convert, they call them a revert. Okay, on the theory that everybody was originally Muslim, right? But the question is, right? So that's why you would say this. Oh, I must have seen you at Mount Sinai, right? And there also is, or used to be, I don't know if there still is. It's been a while since I needed to use a dating site, but there used to be a dating site in mostly observant Jews called sawyouatsinai.com. Okay, sawyouatsinai.com. Okay, and where does this idea come from that every Jewish soul was present at Mount Sinai? Right, it comes from this week's Parashat. Right, the very beginning, Nitzavim. Nitzavim means standing. Okay, but standing not like this, right? Or but like this, right? Like a fortification, a military fortification is called a mutzah. Okay, it's the same root. So nitzavim means like almost station. Okay, we usually translate it as standing. Well, we don't. I mean, none of us have published our own Torah translation, but nitzavim might almost be translated as you are stationed. Okay? At any rate, you are standing or stationed this day, all of you before the Lord your God. Not only with he who stands with us today do I make this covenant, but also with he who is not standing with us here this day. Okay, and the late Professor Neil Gilman from JPS, who one of the main theologians of contemporary conservative Judaism. Okay, and I remember once going to a talk that he gave and sitting in his classroom and listening to him. And this was after I was already a rabbi, but this was an education session for rabbis. And I'm listening to him, and I suddenly exclaimed, "Oh my God, I'm a Gilmanite," right? And it pleased him very much. I don't think he ever heard anybody prior to that describe themselves as a Gilmanite. Okay, but here's what Rabbi Gilman said about this part. "I am perpetually astounded by this claim. Moses is clearly not referring to those who were living but not present at that very moment, right? Not somebody like the oral legend in our family is that my grandfather had tickets to the second fight between Joe Louis and Max Schmeling, right? If you remember, Schmeling was a German, and and this was when the Nazis were already in control of Germany, and he said all kinds of horrible racist things about Joe Louis, and Joe Louis beat him to a pulp in like 90 seconds. Right? And the oral legend in our family is that my grandfather was there at the fight, which was in Yankee Stadium, and he went to the bathroom, okay, right before the beginning of the fight, and by the time he got back to his seat, the fight was over, okay? That's not who this is talking about. Oh, I gotta go to the bathroom, right? So Gilman is saying, Moses here can only be referring to those who are living. Sorry, he can only be referring to all the descendants of that community to the end of time. The verse really means what it says. All of Israel throughout history is bound by God's covenant with our ancestors centuries ago, right? And classical Judaism speaks the language of obligation, right? Not of voluntarism, right? Gilman says we are bound by God's covenant with our ancestors, right? And, I have this discussion frequently, right? Mitzvah does not mean good deed, right? And it does, it means command, right? And then somebody will say to me, but we have free will, right? Doesn't Judaism teach that we have free will, right? And yes, we have free will, but we don't have, in classical Jewish thought, autonomy. Okay, now what's the difference between free will and autonomy? Anybody?
Autonomy is without control. Without any kind of control of society, perhaps.
Right.
Whereas free will, everybody can do what I want.
Right, exactly. So free will is more, I would say free will means you have the ability to do whatever you want. Right? Autonomy means you have the right to do whatever you want, right? And they're two different things, right? I mean, you have the ability to, go to a realtor and see a nice house you like that costs $3 million and write a check for $3 million and give it to a realtor, even though you don't have $3 million, right? I presume, okay? You have the ability to do that. You don't have the right to do that, right? And when the realtor goes to and CBS and they arrest you and you go before the judge and you say, but Your Honor, I have free will. Right. And her honor says, yes, you have free will, and so do I. And I'm free willfully sentencing you to a year in jail or something like that, right? So free will and autonomy are not the same thing. We have the ability to choose whether or what vote to follow. We don't have the right to choose what to follow. Okay, and this is a big problem, all right? And from Mordechai Kaplan on, right, and Kaplan was already writing now almost 100 years ago, right? There is a basic gap at a minimum between Jewish notions of obligation and American notions of autonomy, okay? And this is not just a Jewish problem. I mean, for example, I have, you know, particularly when I'm writing sermons or getting ready for the high holidays, I need to take a break every now and then, right? So I have to find creative ways to waste my time, right? And I started watching on YouTube videos of people who are known as sovereign citizens. Okay, sovereign citizens, and it's videos of sovereign citizens having their windows broken by the police and being dragged out of their cars and arrested. Right now, why are these sovereign citizens having their windows broken and being dragged out of their cars and being arrested? Right, because they maintain that they never entered into a contract with the state. Right, I don't have a contract with the state, and they also have these kind of obscure ideas like that the Constitution protects your right to travel, which it does. Okay, but then they say travel, like there's a difference between traveling and driving. Okay, and driving is for hire or engaged in commerce. Okay, and if I'm traveling, basically, if I'm driving my car, I mean, it's nuts, okay, it's nuts, but many of them, therefore, don't have license plates and don't have driver's license and so on, and they wind up getting arrested. And it's almost like a religion for some of these people, and others are just stupid, and they found something on the internet and they think it's going to work, and then the first time it doesn't work, they give it up, okay? But I mean, the idea, right? I mean, why are we bound by American laws? Why are we bound by American, right? The Declaration of Independence says, right, that the right of a government to govern derives from the consent of the governed, okay? When did you ever consent to be governed by the laws of Maryland or Montgomery County or the United States? When did you ever give your consent? What? When you lived there, but I don't know, did you ever sign a piece of paper that says I consent to be bound by the laws of Maryland? I don't know. I don't think that, I mean, I know that when we bought our house, probably in the several hundred pages of documents that we signed, we consented to be bound by the rules of the Montgomery Village Foundation and the Patton Ridge Homeowners Association, right? But I don't recall ever consenting to, but, you know, it's not my problem. Right, because I have no interest in having my windows broken and being dragged out. Okay, but the idea that you have to do certain Jewish things because God said so, right? And you say, but I didn't agree to that, right? And I didn't agree to that. And just in Jewish law, just like American law, right? A contract, right, has three parts, right? Offer, acceptance, consideration, right? Okay. Stu, I offer you $100 to read the Haftorah today. I accept. Okay. The offer, the acceptance, right? The consideration is the $100. Right? And then your consideration that you provide is the reading of the Haftorah. That's a valid contract. Right? That's a valid contract. If I call you up and say, Stu, you have to read the Haftorah today. And you say, I'm in upstate New York, sorry. And I say, no, but you have to come down here and read the Haftorah. Right? And you say to me, you know, who died and made you king, right? And you could say the same about God, right? I mean, who, right? In other words, yeah, I didn't accept this contract. I didn't accept this contract. Show me where I did. Okay, and if you're a convert, you really did accept the contract. Right? If you're a born Jew, if you're a male-born Jew, right? Your parents accepted this contract on your behalf, right? On day 8, in a very public and painful way, right? If you are a female Jew, right? You're stuck with it, right? But where? Well, so the answer to that is that you were at Sinai and you agreed. Well, I don't remember. Doesn't matter that you remember. You were there, right? How do I know? Atem nitzavim kulchem hayom lifnei Adonai Elohechem. Right, you are stationed this day, all of you, before the Lord your God, to enter into this covenant, right? And similarly, right, if you have, some legal obligation that you entered into, you're going to court that. I don't remember. Well, the other person produces the contract that you signed, that's kind of cut and dry, unless you can prove somehow that it was a forgery or, I don't know, they held a gun to your head or something like that, right? But, so that's the theory, right? The question is, so Gilman would say, this is a broken myth. Okay, this is a broken myth. Because most of us don't really believe this, okay? Now, Rabbi Irving Greenberg, Yitzhak Greenberg, who's an Orthodox rabbi, has a very interesting theory on this, because as an Orthodox rabbi, he has to believe that this really happened, correct? So Greenberg says, yes, there was an offer and acceptance in the contract, right? But what was God's promise? To protect the Jewish people. God didn't fulfill that promise during the Holocaust. Therefore, God broke the covenant, and the Jews are no longer obligated to follow. Okay, if we choose to follow it, that's great. Okay, and Greenberg would say that, the more you follow it, the better a life you'll have and the happier you will be. But it's voluntary because God didn't keep up his side of the bargain. So we no longer have to keep up our side of the bargain, right? But I don't think most of us really believe that that's the case. Although, I mean, here's what this is why I've taught, you know, like how to do your own theology. Is that we don't think about this very much at all, okay? Although I remember when I was the rabbi in York, Pennsylvania, and I had a confirmation class, and we were going through different theories of revelation. And, you know, I taught, right, the traditional or the orthodox theory, which is essentially, right, God gave the Torah to Moses word for word at Mount Sinai in exactly the text that we have now. Okay? And I asked, now these were like 10th grade, right? How many of you believe that? Okay? And they all said they believe that. Okay? And I said to them, look, guys, I know how you guys live your lives, right? So if you believe that the Torah was given word for word by God in Mount Sinai, it says to observe Shabbat, okay? You guys go to the football game on Saturday, you go to the mall on Saturday, right? This is back when they were malls, right? You guys go to the mall on Saturday. The Torah tells us to keep kosher. I know your families, some of you do, some of you don't, right? So if you believe that God gave the Torah word for word, why don't you fully observe it? And they thought about it for a while, and one of them stuck up his hand and he says, well, that's God's opinion. Right? Which is a great answer for a teenager, right? God absolutely said it, and that's God's opinion. But just because God said it doesn't mean I gotta do it, right? Right? You're the only one who's still got a teenager, right? And right? You could see, right? You could see Jacob say it, right? Right? That's God's opinion. Okay, but most of us, right, don't really, I mean, we don't really believe that, I mean, you know, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, okay? But if you don't keep kosher and you eat something that's not kosher, do you really feel like you're sinning? Right? I mean, if you decide to leave here and go shopping or go play golf or go to the movies or whatever, do you really feel like you're sinning? I mean, I don't want to, again, I'm asking that purely rhetorically and purely for like your own introspection, right? But I suspect the answer is, not really, right? That really and this I think is at the crux of why American Jews constantly insist on translating the word mitzvah as good deed, okay? Because if mitzvah means commandment, we're all in trouble, right? We're all in trouble, right? Because, and I mean, to connect it to the word Nitzavim-VaYelech, right? Station, right? I mean, if you're in the military and your superior gives a command, you can't really say, well, that's his opinion, right? That's his opinion, right? That's why the army, that's why the military has jails, right? Because if you say, oh, well, that's, you know, that's the lieutenant's opinion, but I beg to differ, that's a problem, right? But if you say, well, that's the rabbi's opinion, but I beg to differ. What am I gonna do, right? I mean, there was a time when rabbis had jails, right? And seriously, I mean, the rabbi could throw you in jail for not observing Shabbos, right? We don't have jail anymore, right? For better or for worse, we don't have jails anymore, right? So, question is, why do we do the things that we do? Okay, why do we observe what we observe? Okay, and to some extent, it's because we find meaning in it, but sometimes I would say, and this is really not my insight, it's Professor Arnie Eisen's insight, that we do have a sense of commandedness by virtue of belonging to a community, right? My community needs me, right? My community needs, and unfortunately, right, and this is the problem, is that, you know, because realistically, right, in many ways, and I have to say this is true even for me, is that I am culturally much more American than I am Jewish, right? And American society is so fragmented right now, right, that people don't believe that rules apply to them, and they don't feel that they're part of the community. More importantly, they don't feel that they're part of the community, right? And the classic, and I know it's been long and we're not going to have a meeting, so it's okay, I have a little less time, but the classic work of sociology on this issue is Bowling Alone by Robert, okay, who's a Jewish Mayflower descendant who teaches at Harvard, okay, Robert Putnam. And why is it called Bowling Alone? And this goes back, I don't know, at more than 20 years for sure, is that more people, and I don't know to what extent the pandemic has changed this, right, because this data is old, but more people than ever are bowling, but they don't belong to leagues anymore, right? If they want to bowl, they bowl alone or they get a couple of friends, but they don't belong to leagues, okay? And Putnam talks about the differences between thin affiliations and thick affiliations, right? And thin affiliations means that you basically do what you want to do and there's no real sense of obligation. But Stu, you'll find this really interesting. The example that Putnam gives of a thick affiliation is Rotary, right? I'm an ex-Rotarian student. Why is Rotary a thick affiliation?
You commit to a purpose of service.
You commit to a purpose of service, but beyond that, I mean, what happens if you don't fulfill your obligations? You're asked to leave, right? Or you're fined, right? I don't know if your club fines, right? But in my club, if you missed a meeting, it was like a $10 fine, right? Now you could make it up. If you were traveling, right, you could go to a Rotary Club in another city and they would give you a makeup slip and you would give that to the treasurer and then, you know, you didn't have to pay your fine, right? But if you missed a meeting, there was a fine. And if you missed like 25%, is it 20? You missed 25% of the meeting, then you're asked to leave, right? I mean, we don't do that. We don't do that, yeah.
Just want to understand, for this reason, is membership in Rotary, anything because of that?
I don't know.
There is a change.
That people are saying, generally, you're expecting younger generations.
Well, the standard is Zoom.
Right, but I mean. Yeah, I would suspect, I mean, to a certain extent. Look, it also depends, I mean, people get something out of it. People often, you get business connections out of it and so on and so forth, right? But it's not, but in my club, there was certainly a lot of churn. I mean, people joined. And then, like I was, I mean, when my mom got sick, and, I was spending a day a week in New York, I couldn't keep up with the Rotary anymore, so, I left, but yeah,
This idea of belonging to community and times changing, there's very little vivid example of what's going on in the government. Because I've been asked to sort of remember. When I was teaching, not so sure what the parent organization is, but there was groups at the high school level called Keys and Yes, and they were service groups under the umbrella organizations like Rotary. And that was like in the early 70s. And it taught me, I happened to be working in school at the time, where it was very, very tight-knit community in the world. But it taught kids a sense of purpose within this community because of the influences of churches, especially the youth groups, were in the 70s in many communities in Montgomery County much stronger than anything that's happening in the synagogue. Because the synagogues that belong to the big synagogues were in DC.
right,
And like to come down. But the point is, when we talk about how we wind up with these senses and these feelings of opinion versus fact or whatever, using teenagers and 10th grade as an example is perfectly good. But we all know that the first teacher in a kid's school, right, is the parent. Depending upon how that parent is taught, in my opinion, there was a lot less rebellion in terms of being against it being outside of the community or outside of the structure of the religion. There was much more go with the flow based on what we were taught than today, when all kinds of things, like we always talk about the difference between being Jewish American or American Jew. And while we don't necessarily have arrogance to reflect the confinement and the rigidity that I think is in the Orthodox community, as well as anybody, when you go to a place like birth or Stockton, New Jersey, and we all make the same thing. When we live in a community and grow up in a community with these values and these teachings, no longer a matter of opinion, it's a matter of life.
right. Right, I mean, right, so orthodoxy, I mean, this is the change, and I'm sorry, I know that people on Zoom didn't really get that, but it's hard for me to really summarize it, but you can maybe get the question by my answer, and then I'll get this too. Right, is that orthodoxy is a thick affiliation, right? Amish is a super thick affiliation.
Except for the authority first, and then write down.
Right. Because they don't want the thickness to be diluted. Right, and so they would rather kick you out than tolerate nonconformity. Right, they would rather kick you out than tolerate nonconformity. And the same is true certainly in the Hasidic community, less so in the modern Orthodox community, right? But that's one of the differences between the orthodoxy of the 50s and the orthodoxy of today, so that, I mean, you all know me, I love data and statistics and so on, right? Is that, the Orthodox are constantly like triumphant, right? We are the way of the future, right? But if you look at the data, right? They are no higher a percentage of the American Jewish community than they were in the 50s. Okay, the difference is, in the 50s, it was perfectly normal and acceptable to be a member of an Orthodox school and park a block away, right? That's not acceptable anymore, right? So the park a block away people, well, first of all, they're mostly dead, right? But if they're not dead, they're not belonging to an Orthodox school anymore. Right, and so if you look at the data, right, and an incredibly high percentage of American Jews under 18 is Orthodox, right? Because they're having 5, 6, 10 kids per family, and we're having 1.3. Okay, and so you know, now the question is, right, will they have a Christian or will they not have it? Right? And the answer to that is I have no idea. Right? I think that the temptations of American society are still quite strong too.
I just want to comment there. I always wanted to know the point of view of childhood. That's not my point. Going back to Michael's comment about Rotary, I've been a member for 40 years. And I've been a member of 2 different clubs and societies. But what has happened over those 40 years are the same changes that have occurred in our general society. We have virtually lost the sense of family touch. You know, we don't go to Sunday dinner anymore. We don't gravitate. We go to Zoom. We go to somewhere to communicate. It's so different, and that has happened in the context of the community service. When somebody becomes motivated and their purpose for business, they're weeded out. It usually don't last long. You realize they're there to make a buck. They're not there to do what's called that as service above oneself. And it was in that world that I realized the value of sitting down with people who were Jewish, non-Jewish, white, black, Hispanic, whatever, that we were serving a purpose to be good to people that we care about, locally, internationally. And so, you know, the numbers of Rotarians have grown, but the number of clubs have changed because there are less and less people like myself, a rabbi, member, you know, to come and participate at lunch or breakfast or dinner. You know, people's lives have changed. The generation are very much like the Zooming process. And so that's a change. And I can predict that will change many organized environments substantially over the next 20 years. It certainly has the backbone. So my point is, these organizations that you're talking about, covenant, you know, we're part of an organization from Mount Sinai.
Right.
Part of something that was interesting. Which brings me to my other question. You talked about the contract. When a baby, a boy, runs the breach of the law, isn't that his contract? By giving up service?
No, but it's right, but his parents do that on his behalf, okay, which is, look, I mean, this is not a minor problem. I mean, you know, there have been attempts to outlaw circumcision, not voluntary, but to say that an 8-year-old can't consent, right? The problem with that is that adult circumcision is a much more serious procedure, right? But it's a problem. I mean, I have no real answer to it. But you know, but I would say the thing is that, yes, I mean, I think the problem of non-Orthodox Judaism is that we've lost that sense of purpose, right? We really have. I mean, if you ask a Rotarian, what is the purpose of Rotary? Right? They have a 3-word answer: service above self. Right? If you ask, I mean, even in our shul, right? What's the purpose of our shul? What's the purpose of our shul? Right? And I mean, I suspect 45, 50 years ago was have a Hebrew school, right? Well, that's clearly not the purpose of our shul today, right? And for a lot of people, it's keep the building. Okay, now this is a great building, but do we, right? In other words, without getting into what is or should be, there is no consensus as to what the purpose of our shul is. And frankly, there is no consensus as to what the purpose of Judaism is, really. I mean, I suspect you'll hear more about this on the high holiday stage.
I wouldn't say I disagree with what you're saying.
Please do.
No, I'm not, I'm afraid to disagree with you. I'm trying to figure out how to read this. But I think, and I don't mean to criticize or insult anybody, but the more active that I became in show, the more it wasn't say the building, it was really being an active participant in making a richer, I'm not trying to say it like it.
Right.
I'm trying to say what I thought my purpose was, to enrich Jewish life and to build bonds of friendship. And I think for people that, I mean, I don't know what other people did in their lives, but I think for those who have any kind of activity or action within the synagogue, have nothing to do with their degree of religiosity. I think there are more people that have been things who have a sense of community, even if it's temporary, the learning, and much people that say going to the recitation. And it goes another little quick direction. I think something absolutely incredibly wonderful is you've seen the show Blue Bus. You don't have to, it doesn't matter that you're not reading us, I'm not doing this. But today, when society, sociality, everything is described, and the football games, and soccer matches, and everything else, and you look at the span that are either legally professional or the police, okay, for those who don't know the story that I'm talking about, it doesn't make any difference what kind of crisis they're in, or what kind of anything is going on in the community. On Sunday, that family sits down at that table, they begin with the ceremonial thanking of God.
Right.
And then they share the family experience. That to me reminds me of a totally different lifespan of when I was a little girl and the original Goldbergs were a series of television. Same thing. All the type existed, but then they had their own separate lives and all came down together as students. So I don't think it's dead. I just think it is, as you said, so fragmented. And I think every set of parents, or every mentor, every aunt, cousin, whatever, who has an opportunity to share a little of Jewishness, every time we do together, whether it's a football game, whether it's a dinner table, that's what keeps things along. That's
Right, okay. All right, we're gonna go on. This has been a really good discussion, and I think there's no point in me just reading a few verses of the Torah portion. We discussed it, but I will have Stu, since I gave you $100 to do it. So of course, with the blessing of Blessed to be great Torah, to engage in the study of Torah.